And the broadcast is live. I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night to all of you tuned in to us, either on YouTube or at the festivalstorytellers.com. Welcome to this festival. It's our second week, and we're encouraging everybody to join us, get the story straight from the storytellers. And this festival is about individuals who are storytellers interested about stories and our authors sharing the story behind the story. And it has been my privilege to be part of this festival. And I tell you, please go check us out and visit us. I would like to say thank you to Readers Magnet for making this happen, getting us to meet with the authors, getting the authors to interact with their readers and giving us viewers so that we can have questions. And this is going to be a very fun segment for Author of the Hour. We have our dear author, Benoit Blachard. I will be introducing him more later. We are also joined by Jake Rampagos. He's from Readers Magnet. He works with Operational Excellence. My name is Robert. I'm with Training and Quality, and I'm very excited to start this session. We've warmed up 30 minutes before this, and we've had plenty of conversation. But before I get too excited, I will do my best to introduce Mr. Blachard. And he is from Quebec, Laval. He takes with him experiences in engineering and economics. And I know Benoit will have to giggle a little bit as I read the university, École Polytechnique de Montréal. And I've Googled the place. It's a beautiful place. And he comes with us with a very interesting story that takes our imaginations to the test, that borders philosophical questions. It's for individuals who think deep and individuals who would like entertainment. It's very broad, it's very dynamic. And so without further ado, Benoit, I will let you say hi and share your message. Greet our viewers from around the globe in this festival of storytellers. I will give you the stage, sir.
Hello, everyone. Is there anybody watching us right now? If so, hello from rainy, the outer suburbs of Montreal. It's still raining, as I can see, but it's tapering down now. We're having a sunset here. So that's it for the weather. That's not what we came here for. So we came here for my book, Cyber Brain, and the philosophical questions that it raises. And we'll just go on right now. Is there any question already?
Not yet, Benoit, but we do. We do have questions for you, sir. And to all our viewers out there in the festivalstorytellers.com, or if you're tuned in to YouTube, we're inviting all of you to visit the website, the festivalstorytellers.com. Check out Mr. Blachard's booth. You can get to interact with him, send him a message for any questions that you will have, or any warm wishes in regards to him after this session or during this session. We are featuring his book, Cyber Brain and Cyber Brain Garden Angel, and we'll be talking more about it. And as I've said earlier, this is a very interesting conversation because it is fiction, but it is not far removed from reality. But before anything, I will ask away first off with my understanding about the book, Benoit, is more often than not, the setting of most stories that are similar to this would be, it's a dystopian world. Mm-hmm. But you take us into a transition, right, from how that dystopian world could happen.
Yeah, that's right. I've had a few required readings at school. One of them was George Orwell's 1984, and earlier than that, I've had to read Ira Levin's World. I don't remember the title, but it was about a world in which everybody was like happy, but that's because they were on drugs, and they never had any names. They just had numbers. So the one thing that struck me about both of these stories is that they describe the world as it happened after the transition from the current world to their dystopian worlds was complete. So no thought was ever given about how did it come to that. So that's the kind of question that I was asking myself. What
And yes, please
what
go on,
kind
sir.
of what kind of chain of events led to the start of the transition from our world to a dystopian world? So that's kind of the the kind of question that I wanted to answer.
And folks, if you are viewing us right now, if you are from Benoit's readers, it's time to check that book out to see, because I think the bigger question really is, are we headed there? Right. And we'll be asking that question later. And I love 1984, but it is true, right? Like, it allows us to speculate how did we get here? But you take us to a journey and probably to self-realization, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we are really getting there or we're doing something to prevent it. I'm very excited to ask some of my questions because this is science fiction, philosophical in nature, but at the same time quite imaginative. But I'll let Jake um, ask his questions to you, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, by the way. Jake Relampago. So, to those who are watching right now, streaming. So, with Reader's Magnet, with Operational Excellence. Um, so, basically, I haven't written any book, but I did write some of our processes here in Reader's Magnet. So making sure that every publication are of excellent quality, right? So that's enough about me and more of my questions. So on your story, Benoit, computer chips interacting with the brain. So how close do you think that we are in this in real life?
Well, I can tell you one thing about my day job. I'm a paratransit driver, and I've seen a few cases, one or two. They're pretty rare still, but it's becoming more and more common, where people can actually drive their electric wheelchair with a chip that interacts with their brain. I've seen one or two people that have setups like this. So we're not that far away from having a computer chip interact with the brain in a way that well, in the case of the wheelchairs, it's the brain that's giving orders, but it could be the other way around pretty soon.
That's a very interesting answer, because then again, you take us from something fictional in our imagination to something that's happening in reality.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's always been the thing with a book, right? It teases us. Can this happen? And then you tell us right now that it is happening. And
Mm-hmm.
I hear suspense music in the background. Before I ask my question, we got a few from our audience, Benoit. We have from Jacob. He's asking if there are lingering questions from the book you're still thinking about. I think we'll be talking about that. This is the sequel to
Mm-hmm.
Cyber Brain. And I think, if I'm understanding Jacob's questions correctly, um, are there some unanswered questions that will be answered in the sequel?
Plenty. The third book that I'm in the process of writing right now, it should be finished a year or two from now. Uh, is is basically an answer to a question, one lingering question. What if the technology gets taken over by someone with a different agenda those who developed it? So that's the kind of question that the third book, which is currently in the works, will be trying to answer.
So Benoit, it's like Cyberbrain, Garden Angel, right? And there's an interweaving question mark. And the
Mm-hmm.
suspense will still be there. So there you have it, Jacob. Be on the watch, and you'll be surprised later about how the story transpires. We got Ben also, Benoit, asking, what was the triggering point to write this book? I know you've talked about how sorry, paratransit driving has been.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm not sure if that's a triggering point, but you did share earlier about where the inspiration to write this came from, right?
Yeah, actually, it's a dream that I had one night, and I was in the process of writing another book that I don't plan to get published, even though I still have the file. Uh, and I woke up from that dream, and there we go. That's the basis of a story.
Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Now I'm flooded with questions, and so I'm gonna find a question here that's similar to the question that we have. So from the audience, what do you think about chips? And this is similar to your question earlier, Jake. Getting
Right.
in our bodies through the vaccines injected. Ooh, that's a little spooky. And this is one of the conspiracy theories going around now.
Yes, I've heard about that one quite a bit myself, but I don't think there's anything to worry about because when you in the way they inject a vaccine, basically they put a needle right into your your shoulder, and that's it. When you put an RFID chip in a pet, this is done all the time nowadays. They actually encourage it if the pet leaves and someone retrieves it, they want to know who's the owner. They're going to look at the chip that's inserted. But to install this chip, it's a much more complex procedure than vaccine. So basically, those who tell me that there's a computer chip in the vaccine, I don't believe it for a minute.
Okay, I gotta say that's a relief right there, Benoit. But at the same time, what you're telling us is that the technology is not far from it happening. So the
Mm-hmm.
suspense music is playing again. So we have a question, or maybe a suggestion from Annie. We should see this book in the big screen, please. And we've had a fun conversation with Jake about this earlier, and so I think I'm going to encourage Jake to share. Your radio interview details because he's the one who went through it and the discussion, right? Are we potentially going to see Cyberbrain Guardian Angel, and the next installments to the story on the big screen soon?
There's something in the works right now. I have a complete screenplay ready to submit to the studios for the first book. There's a screenplay in progress for the second book as well, but it make it the I'm not quite satisfied with what's been done yet. So there's got to be a few scenes that have to be shortened so that we don't lose the audience in mid movie. But for the first book, there's a screenplay ready to be submitted to the studios. There are a few studios that said they're interested, but as far as I can tell, so far there's no new development. And because there's a backlog at the studios because of COVID-19, well, it might take a little longer than expected.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We're going to keep some more of the interesting details about Cyberbrain and the whole series in details at the tail part. But Jake, do you have any questions for Benoit before I go back to our audience and my question as well?
Yeah, we kind of like touched on this a little bit, and since you already mentioned your plan for a screenplay, right? Who do you want to direct your movie, potential movie? If ever that happened.
The director, my first choice would have been Paul Greengrass, the one who directed The Bourne Supremacy and The Bourne Ultimatum. However, when I said that to the company that is writing the screenplay, their answer to me was that Greengrass had to take early retirement because of health issues. So uh, somebody similar, somebody with a similar style, I mean, could do just as well. We've been discussing Christopher Nolan, who did the Batman trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy. Uh, he's been working his entire movies around realism, making sure that the story feels real, that it could be possible in the real world, and that's basically the kind of story that I want to see on the big screen for Cyberbrain. Something that is credible, not a fairy
Absolutely.
tale.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
I
definitely a good choice. Yeah, definitely want to see a Christopher Nolan version of your movie, right? Um, coming from someone who's been watching superheroes movies like Batman versus Superman, it's also credited to that, right? So yeah, looking
Mhm.
forward to to your success on your movie pitch.
There it
Mhm.
is. And the three of us were talking about not letting the geek out as early as now, but apparently we can't hold it. I'm going to segue back to our viewers from around the globe. If you are just tuned in, or if you just caught us on the Author of the Hour segment, we're featuring Cyberbrain Garden Angel, our author Benoit Blachard. And the story about this, really, and I'd like to think, is an ascent to humanity to a possible dystopian future wherein our brains will have chips. We call it cyber, right,
Mhm.
Benoit? And the question is, if we do have that, we become a society wherein it's beautiful, right? There won't be much crimes, right? But we would also lose our identity as a species because the question of free will, right, and our own choice to do the better choice and take the higher road.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I've been curious about, because I've been watching the series about how social media, Benoit, has been shaping people's opinions, right? And it's not just social media. In maybe the past decade, it's been the news that had been shaping people's opinion. And we go back to the Renaissance or the 15th century, wherein it's our fundamental beliefs that shape our perspective of how we
Mhm.
look into things. So, do you think that is cyber or that chip an analogy to that, or how different is this from those influences that shape how we view things currently?
Well, the main difference I would say is that once you get the cyber in your brain, your thought patterns, they're set in stone for life. I mean, the cyber dictates how you are going to think from now on. Whereas if you get influenced by the news or social media, or as you say, the religious elite in the Renaissance and even before that, you can always have something happen to you that makes you rethink what you believe, and 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 it changes your entire perspective on things. I've seen it happen on some people, and there you go. The difference now with the cyber is that the cyber itself prevents that from happening in the first place.
Interesting. Interesting. So if I'm going to take it into some familiar terms between the two of us, so if it's 1984, it's them changing everything, right? But people
Hmm.
can still think differently. Cyber is the ultimate. It's like terminal. The brain only takes in commands from cyber. That's
Hmm.
creepy. Th- I'm asking this to the both of you because we've had this conversation, right? This is the hairline distinction between fictional, possibly scary, true, or nerdy, or even philosophical in nature and entertainment. Should this technology be introduced in real life? Because I don't know, but we see so much in the news, right? And sometimes it's not entirely promising. And this is a solution to, I would like to say, a perfect society wherein there's not much discord. So, is this something that we need? Should we start thinking about introducing or welcoming it? Maybe.
Uh, Currently, we're having a situation in Canada right now. You've probably lived that in the United States, but there are people who refuse the COVID vaccine for various reasons. Some of them philosophical, because the possibility of inserting a chip has been mentioned earlier, and some people will just not believe what I said about this objection. But there are, if something like the cyber gets introduced, uh, of course, once everybody has their own cyber, there will be no longer any discord. But in the meantime, in the transition, when people need to be sold on the idea, some people will, I say will, take their weapons to prevent that from happening. Take up their weapons and start a revolution just to prevent that from happening. Will they be successful? Only time will tell. But they will definitely, there will definitely be a resistance to it.
Now that
So that that resistance alone might be bloodier than the what they're trying to prevent.
that makes sense. Now it adds another layer of deep thinking onto the subject matter. And there it is again. Is this a recurring theme in your book, Benoit? And I'm sorry, we are flooded with questions. I definitely will go to them one by one. But before that, is this a recurring pattern in the book wherein you kind of tell us this is fiction, but not that fictional? It's a possibility, or you might think, but it is really closer than you think. Is that a message that's recurring in the book? Because that's what I feel right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. In the first book, at one point, the Dr. Olson's assistant goes checks out some written material about the cyber, to see uh, whether it worked as intended, whether it has any social side effects that are unwanted. And she finds that indeed there are some unwanted side effects. But yeah, that that's the kind of question you have to ask. Uh, I don't know what I'm talking about right now. I
I'm,
lose what
I'm,
I'm.
I'm, I'm visualizing it, Benoit. This is why it's Paul. Sorry, what's Paul? Was it Paul Greengrass?
Paul
Right?
Greengrass, yes.
And Nolan, because I've seen those movies, and it's always that it's a tug of war between philosophical questions, entertainment, and is this real? It is. It's that.
Mhm.
Now I'm starting to understand. I have the responsibility to check on people's questions, right? So I will have to tone down on my questions for now, and let's go back to a question from the audience. Do you see artificial intelligence coming into play in the next 5 years?
Well, uh, definitely. I mean, in writing my third book, I've just started this week experimenting with speech to text software. And well, the software needs to know what language you're trying to speak, and because of my French Canadian accent, it might be somewhat difficult to understand that I'm really saying an English word. And well, of course, also the the proper names that I use in the book, some of which are French Canadian, some of which are German, Arabic, and there's the villain Patrick Kobayashi. Well, Japanese is one of the easiest languages to recognize by AI, but you need there the software already exists that will transform your speech into words. It and I'm experimenting with it to write my own book. So definitely there will be further developments in the AI.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Benoit. Let me go back to some of the questions here. Now, there's a question about who's a good actor to play as a protagonist of the movie. We've talked about this. I'm going to keep that a little suspense, Brian. Stay with us until the tail end, and we will talk about who are the top two actors that Benoit has in mind. And I tell you, it's very, very surprising.
Mm-hmm.
Another question from the audience here has something to do with writing recommendations. So, if you had to do something differently as a child or a teenager to become a better writer, or as an adult, right? Any recommendations for upcoming writers? So basically, I think the question, Benoit, is, do you have tips that you can share to aspiring writers or authors who wants to take the same genre, maybe, or the same passion?
Yes. The basic premise of your story has to be could be as crazy as you want it to be, but from that point on, you have to make the whole story believable from the point of view of the story that you're trying to write. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about: the Matrix trilogy. Now, in the Matrix, the basic premise is just out there. It's just unbelievable. But the writers took care of making sure that within that frame, everything has to be believable, and I think they did a good job also. So that's my main point. You have to make it believable. Sometimes, as Mark Twain said, you have to delete more stuff than you keep in. And he didn't say it like this, but that's what it means. So sometimes you have thoughts in your mind that need to make it into a book. You have to write it down somewhere as quickly as possible. Also, before you start writing a book, write a chapter by chapter synopsis of the entire book. Don't start writing the actual book until you're done with that synopsis. You can change it along the way. I've done it myself, but that's the first step. Write a synopsis and then write the book chapter by chapter. Follow your synopsis, make only minor changes, but you can make the changes. So
I
that's
Yeah, I think I like that tip, Benoit. Right, like I've had the opportunity to converse with the authors, but that's a new thing, right? You make small chunks of chapters, and it becomes a bigger story.
mhm.
That's interesting. So there we have it for all the folks out there that's tuned in with us, either on YouTube or the Festival of Storytellers on our live stage. Do get to reach Benoit. He has a website, whatisacyber.com. You can also reach him and ask for his tips, his writing process through chat on the festivalstorytellers.com booth, or send him an email if you want to have more details about the writing process that he has, especially in coming up with a story that will tease the imagination, but at the same time, stay true to reality. Before I move on and pick up the questions from our audience, Jake, any questions that you'd like to ask? I owe you that.
So I'd like to piggyback on, what Benoit shared earlier about writing, right? So which part do you enjoy the most when it comes to writing? Is it the world building? Is it the developing of character arcs, or is it creating a plot and things of that nature?
World building. I Even in a science fiction story, I try to keep the story believable from an early 21st century point of view. That's one of the main criticism that I got from my editor. That apart from the cyber, there wasn't much technology described in the book that that doesn't already exist. Uh, I've I've said something about hydrogen powered cars. I told a lot of people why I believe hydrogen cars are the way of the future instead of electric. And some another thought came up later on that told me we're not out of the woods with oil yet. So
Yeah.
And that right there, right, takes us back into the realm of individuals who entertain these conspiracy theories, right?
mhm.
And I don't like to term it that. I'd like to think these are alternative ideas to the current situation. And although these technologies do exist, and we understand that these technologies ought to exist to make things better, the bigger question is we don't necessarily take that step to multiply that technology. And this is one thing I'm very curious about asking Benoit to follow the same trail of Jake's conversation, right? So there's a company, right? There's an interest behind cyber being placed
Mhm.
onto the brain. And there's organizations involved. And the way I look at these organizations is that much more than the interest of making society better, it's actually a capitalist approach. Am I following it correctly? That the intention is not purely let's do cyber so people
Mhm.
will be okay, but let's do cyber because right? Is that something that's in the background of the story?
Well, of course, the story says Patrick Kobayashi is the richest man in the world. That's that's the first thing you learn about him in the first book. But as far as being capitalist, I would say the correct word would be mercantilist, because capitalist, when you talk about capitalism, you're really saying that the government is not involved in any way in the process. Well, Patrick Kobayashi, the way he makes his fortune, the, the government is in fact his only client. So that's one thing to consider. He's still making money though, and he's still influencing governments. We learn about that throughout the entire books. But he's trying in Cyberbrain Guardian Angel. He's trying to get the interest of a foreign government that has been so far hostile to him. That's basically the story of Guardian Angel.
And this is the suspense that I'd like to keep for everybody, right? So Kobayashi is that image, not a capitalist, a mercantilist. Only clientele would be the world powers, right? I
Mhm.
think the bigger question really is what is the main objective of Kobayashi? And I will not touch that point for now. I will go back to the questions of our viewers because it's starting to become plenty. Um, going back to the writing part, Benoit, and again, I'm encouraging all of you to visit Benoit's website and his booth so that you can ask any question to him and get the response. But here's one question from the audience: what is the most difficult part of the artistic process? And I think this is the writing process. What's the most challenging?
Staying true to the synopsis you've written, learning about stuff that you never thought you'd ever learn about. Because when I started writing Cyberbrain, my knowledge about medicine was zero. And I had to take a crash course in medicine. I'm not a practicing doctor, and I'm not claiming to be one, but I had to find out how they do their work so that the story will be believable. So that's the kind of thing that I had to keep in mind. I also had to do a trip to Buffalo from Montreal just to see if it's possible to drive from Buffalo to the Quebec border on the US side without ever taking an interstate and do it in a single day. And so because part of the plot of the book, this is what happens. So I had to make sure that it can be done in real life before I put that in the book.
Thank you very much. So, to all our viewers out there, we have to ground it to reality. We can be as creative as we can, be as fictitious as we can. But to Benoit's point, the challenge will always be how to stay true to that synopsis and make it believable, right? Because I think what we all want is to imagine, but at the same time, when we start doubting if it's going to happen or not, something close to reality is going to make it more effective as a message. I got 3 more questions on the line here, but Jake, I'm going to give you some time to throw your questions to Benoit.
Yeah, you did mention about making sure that technologies are kind of grounded, right? So when deciding which technologies that are available in the future, so how do you determine what makes it into your story? So what technologies do you choose that's close to present and current, right? And that gets onto your novel in I mean on your story in a futuristic version of those.
Well, I have to say that there are a lot of technologies that get developed, but then the target audience, the consumers say no, we don't want that. So the technology is forgotten. So that's what I have to keep in mind. So it's not just because the technology is possible that it will make it to the market in the future. People have to find the new technologies useful. Otherwise, they'll be obsolete before they're even on the market. So I have to so you have to develop the technology maybe that will be useful to the average consumer. And the big challenge is 20, 30 years down the road, which technologies are going to make it and which ones aren't, that are being developed right now.
And I'm sorry, I'm just starting to imagine with everything that's new that's being tried. Like I'm there when we look back at history, there had been great leaps in technology, right? Like the wheel was a great idea. The engine was a great idea. But now, I don't think a month passes by where we don't do any breakthroughs as far as science and technology is concerned. And at the same time, your story about cyber, Benoit, just makes a possibility of it monthly exponentially fast that it might happen Because if we're discovering and creating new things at that pace, we'll never really know. If come tomorrow we wake up and like all of a sudden there's that poster saying like, "Hey guys, if you want a better world, let's do cyber," right? And I think that's the whole interest about this. Um, there's two questions that are almost around the same context: science and technology, and I think human responsibility of the application of it. So we have questions from Brian and Jonas. So Brian is asking, are you more inclined to believe that our future holds more cybernetics? And I think we're going back to the traditional meaning of cybernetics here, not cyber from our book,
Mhm.
Benoit, or genome manipulation. Those are very touching, interesting topics. What do you say about those, sir?
Cybernetics versus genome manipulation. Well, cybernetics do not affect how the brain thinks. No, it's the other way around. Genome manipulation will change your physical appearance, but it will not change your thought pattern, which cybernetics will do. So these two kinds of technologies can be developed in parallel to one another for different purposes, and they can be made to interact with each other. Uh, Now we're also talking about the nanotechnologies, in which some science fiction authors are saying that there's going to be little robots traveling through your blood and doing things that you might want to do, like curing a disease or something like that. But then they might also do things that you don't want to do. Uh, One thing that comes to mind is when the movie The Island by Michael Bay, with Ewan McGregor in the main role, and Sean Bean was playing the villain in it. That sort of thing happened in the movie, but these are two technologies that are developed in parallel to one another and for different purposes.
Thank you. And I think I'll add a little tune into that. So, genome manipulation, cybernetics may not necessarily affect humanity, but cyber definitely will. I think that's right. If there's an ultimate threat as far as ethics and technology is concerned, the questions that we have about genome manipulation and cybernetics may not be as a threat to life as we know it compared to cyber, and that's what it's play in the book Cyber Brain and Cyber Brain Guardian Angel. Going to Jonas's question, and also this is a praise actually, Benoit. I really do love the cyberpunk vibe. I totally agree, sir. On the book, does this mean that they can copy your DNA and make another you by putting the chip back? So this is Benoit. This is the speculation that we were talking about, right? The topic is so interesting. It's so broad. It teases reality and it borders a hairline distinction with fiction. And so this is one of those spin-offs that we were talking about. Is that going to be a possibility? Is there something like that along the way, maybe on the third book or in future installments?
I think that very question was hinted at in the first book, Cyber Brain, uh, without me ever thinking about it, because somebody pointed out that we all become carbon copies of Patrick Kobayashi with the cyber. So that's definitely an avenue worth exploring.
There it is. And we were just talking about this. And so for all our audiences that's tuned in with us right now, either on YouTube or the event stage for the Festival of Storytellers, we were talking about Cyberbrain and the trilogy being turned into a movie. And we
Mhm.
were talking about the conversations that will revolve around it and the spin-offs. And definitely look like Benoit's welcoming many ideas that he can consider, along with thinking about what's going to transpire in those things, because definitely there's going to be an adaptation to it, and the spin-offs. Um, those are the only questions that I have for now. Jake, I know you've been meaning to have some questions yourself. I'll give you some time.
Yeah. Trey asked already who the. Let's reserve it for later, right? I'll save that card and for the audience for last. Right. So apart from cyber, what do you think are the other technologies that will be introduced to us by the year 2050s? Do you see flying cars? Do you see lightsabers being created?
Flying cars, the way people drive right now, I don't think they're going to be legalized. Although they might very well be uh, uh, available. As far as what kind of technology will power these cars, I think I've been discussing it earlier. I believe hydrogen cars will displace electric cars, but at the same time, the what I was what crossed my mind was the way the oil is processed in an oil refinery right now. You have a part of the oil that is just extracted and sold as is to the airlines. It's jet fuel, it's kerosene. But then the rest, if it's not sold on the market, it will become toxic waste. If you know your history correctly, uh, uh, J.D. Rockefeller invented plastics as a way to do something useful with the toxic waste that his oil industry was producing. And so with the kerosene being basically what will drive the demand for oil, if the components of gasoline which are not used for to make kerosene, you're not allowed to sell any of them. I'm sorry, but gasoline powered cars will have to stay on the market. If not, gasoline will become very cheap. So that's the kind of thing you have to think about. Of course, if it by then airliners are powered by nuclear centrals in their engines, which is very much a possibility, then you can do away with gasoline and go ahead with hydrogen powers, which will have some issues of its own. I understand, but the the also we can think of a lot of a lot of applications for technologies that already exist. 2 years ago, I heard a story about the 2000s being a landmark decade for the development of new technologies. And in the 2010s, that has slowed down. But the adaptation of these new technologies from the previous decade to to the the everyday life of people, that has taken hold in the 2010s more than ever before. Adaptation of existing technologies.
And when you put it that way, Benoit, I can see, right, the engineering and the economics playing right there in the technologies, right, from your experience. And when you said it, right, landmark decade, or landmark year, and when you talk about technology, and how fast it is changing,
Mhm.
it got me to thinking that I don't know if this is a correct assumption, but there. there hasn't been a point in time wherein we're at this precipice or at this brink when the world is more polarized than ever. And I'm going back to the setting, right? Because it's not that far for cyber brain, I think, to happen. If you look at the United States, if you look at the Pacific, if you look at everywhere, really, right? The world is more polarized than ever. There's like divisions, and these divisions like create more divisions, and so we're more divided than ever. And we start to feel that without a consensus, which had been the hallmark of civilization, we will go extinct, right? And so, what if one day
Mhm.
somebody would say, maybe not a Kobayashi, and say, "I got a better solution, cyber." And I'm thinking, right, if that does happen, and moving forward, what does life after cyberbrain consumes the rest look like?
Well, basically, that's what all three novels are about. I mean, in the first book, you have you, you have the cyber being someone being freed from his cyber and discovering what life is like without a cyber. And also we learned that the resources to implant cybers in everybody are just not available, so they had have to prioritize who will get the cyber and who will not. In the second book, there's the political process and the media involvement that needs to be present if the cyber is to be accepted by the general population. And in the third book, which I'm in the process of writing, that will talk about what if the cyber technology falls into hands that were not supposed to touch it in the first place.
Very big, very good, and very big issues that we're dealing with. Each book touches
Mhm.
something, right? Is there a need, right? Are there deviants, and what is the underlying reasons behind it? And then ultimately, what is our responsibility as a society, as a culture, towards the advancements that we are making? I will think a little bit on that. And Jake, I know you've been meaning to ask this. We're going back to how interesting this is, what cult it would create in the movie world, and in the coffee tables of nerds, geeks, comic book lovers alike. And so I'm going to let you ask that question that you've been meaning to ask earlier, as far as what the movie is concerned, which is the question to, um, was it actors? Yes, actors, right? Who are
Actors.
the actors that you think would be great for the role of the main protagonist?
Yeah, the main protagonist, of course, is Dr. Warren Alston, the neurosurgeon who takes away the cyber from the teenager from Buffalo. Uh, I said earlier that the my first two choices for main actor to for that role are Daniel Craig, who played James Bond, and also Jim Caviezel. If you remember him, he's the one who played Jesus in Mel Gibson's movie Passion of the Christ. So those are my first two choices for the role of Dr. Alston. As for the role of Max Wilson, of course, he's just out of teenage, so we'll have to do with an actor that is not yet a household name.
Okay, okay.
And for the role of Patrick Kobayashi, uh, I've suggested Jet Li.
Ooh.
I see a reaction from Jake right there. This is getting more and more interesting as we start to put faces to the characters, right? But a deeper appreciation of the story and these characters and the choices Benoit has, I think, will be much, much more clearer once we check out Cyberbrain and Cyberbrain Garden Angel. So I'm inviting everybody to check it out on Amazon. Reach out to our author through his website. And check his booth as well. Jake, I only have, I think, one question left for Benoit, and I'm going to keep it for last. So I'm going to give you what your question is, if you have some.
Yeah. So after you complete the last book of your trilogy, right? What other plans do you have in mind? Do you plan to write a spin-off series first, or do you want to make another adaptation on a different medium, like a comic book? So what are your plans, Benoit?
For Cyberbrain, my plans after the third book, I'm not sure I have any plans for that, but I definitely had something that I've started working on, which is uh, the first draft of that novel is complete right now, but I have to refine it before I submit it to an editor. It's about astronauts who colonize a distant planet, like very much like Earth. They end up in the ruins of an ancient civilization that looks very much like ours, the one we live in on this planet, except it's all abandoned. It's all in ruins, and the aliens are nowhere to be found.
That's interesting.
And the leader of the astronauts wants to know what happened to these aliens.
I'm sure if we had a bigger crowd right now, and if we didn't have the restrictions that the pandemic had brought, this would have been an interesting conversation for a huge crowd, and it would take us more than an hour to talk about it. I will reach out to you separately because it reminds me of a movie and a book, Benoit. And I definitely think it's a good idea, but I'm sure Jake's pushing on the Netflix series. This guy's this guy is a movie buff. Um, I would like to say that this discussion has been fun, but at the same time, it makes us and should let all of us think deeper around our responsibility as a civilization, our responsibility to tame our interests and how we utilize technology and science. And it should actually make us think deeply about the current situation, current events, and make us ask the finer questions about what will the future look like based on the actions that we have now. And if I'm going to look at just the synopsis, and hopefully all of us will be checking it out, the question is this a reality that is a possibility? Or can we do something to avert that? Or should we? I think these are the questions that I'll be taking away with me after the end of this conversation and as we await the third installment for Cyberbrain. Benoit, Jake, we're almost at the top of the hour, and I would like to give Benoit the message that he wants to communicate to our viewers, to his readers, to aspiring authors, and everyone that's tuned in right now at the Festival of Storytellers. Mr. Blachard, I'll give you the time to say hi, hello, and share your message to the people that's with us.
Hi. So I don't really have anything to say that hasn't already been said, and at a few moments during this hour, we've deviated to subjects that are not related directly to the book, but I'm sorry about that. But if you want to check out what life would be like with a cyber implementation that is not available for everybody, but it's definitely a possibility. Well, the that's what the Cyberbrain and Cyberbrain Guardian Angel, both books are all about that. So I invite you to buy the books and enjoy them.
Thank you very much, sir. Enjoy them, buy the books, enjoy them, ask questions, and
Mhm.
interact with our author. Visit his website at whatisacyber.com. Check him out on his booth at the festival, storytellers.com. Send him an email. I tell you, Mr. Blachard is a very fun guy and entertains ideas. And I think he transforms common ideas into fictitious and teasing questions that will make us think twice about what we do and our choices every day. Um, and I guess those are the only questions that I have. It has been a pleasure, sir, to have you in this segment of Author of the Hour. Jake, thank you so much as well for your perspectives and taking it a little bit further into the current events, entertainment. To all our viewers from around the world, thank you for staying with us, asking your questions, sharing your love and comment to our dear authors. Once again, the Festival of Storytellers is on its second week, and we're inviting everybody to check the event. This is the event where you can talk to the authors, interact with them, and the story comes to life as the author shares the stories behind it. And let's all have some fun in this festivities. So, on behalf of all of us at Readers Magnet and everyone in the Festival of Storytellers, on behalf of Mr. Benoit Blachard and Jake, thank you so much. We'll see you all soon. Stay safe and take care. Bye bye for now.
Bye.